Welcome. This video here, I begin to answer questions that you have asked of me. If you are seeing this video before Sunday night at about midnight, then you are still welcome to pop back to the prior video here that I posted on Friday, where this contest was announced as Bug Contest. It says this on the cover shot, the thumbnail for the video, Bug Contest 2020 number 3, I think it said. So here we go. The first question 3 hours ago by Nate. Here's my question. What's the worst bug-related injury you've gotten? And I did sort of preview this question here, and so I purposely went downstairs and put on this bug shirt that says, easily distracted by bugs. Hopefully you can see that without me standing up and throwing everything into chaos here. But the point of the shirt is that it's not the bugs themselves that present a danger to me. Instead, it's my own actions, my own shortcomings, inability to pay attention, my tendency to be easily distracted by bugs, whether I'm in the field nearly walking off a cliff with Oren McMonigal in the middle of the night while we have headlamps and are looking at another cliffside, or whether it is I am packing scorpion orders for a customer or centipede orders for a customer, assassin bug, velvet ant stings for a customer. I'm really the greatest danger to myself in that sense, because I would never blame the bugs for being the cause of an injury when it was me who was going to them. Now, to answer your question, when I was in Arizona a few years ago, I was cruising down the road. I had my window down. It was kind of hot outside. But sometimes when it's so hot, you roll your window down even though it's hot outside and you have an air conditioner inside, because the wind will help to dry you off a little bit when you are just so sweaty from being out in the desert a few moments ago. And anyway, there was a big swarm of bees that just kind of crossed over our car while we were driving down the road, and one of them hit the rear view mirror there on the driver's side and just happened to pop in to the vehicle. And I think it was on my arm, actually. Because it had just hit the rear view mirror, I mean, it was ready to sting as soon as it hit my arm, and it did. And my arm and my chest a little bit, it swelled up, and I was very concerned that it was going to ruin the rest of my trip. And I went and got myself some Benadryl pills. It was an at-work injury because, well, I'm always working, but you'll be surprised to know that I've never been bitten or stung by any of my pet bugs or the bugs that I have as a consequence of running the business. And I'm probably lucky. I'm excessively careful, and we'll move on to the next question from Hawkeye Jones. And I think I commented down below that whenever I see your name, Hawkeye Jones, it always reminds me of the A-Team. Just sounds like an A-Team name. I love it, Hawkeye Jones. I'm gonna remember that forever. And next time I'm really gonna say it in an exciting way, just for fun. Are there any bugs that you have been really interested in keeping but haven't been able to due to laws about what live animals can be brought into the US? There are a bunch. I mean, honestly, I think it's not unreasonable for me to say that every bug I've ever seen that is capable of being kept as a pet and reproducing in captivity in particular, I would love to experience them all. I would love to see them all. And so one thing that comes quickly to mind are those little jewel wasps that paralyze cockroaches, and then they sort of they commandeer the cockroach, and basically the sting causes the cockroach to sort of follow the commands of the wasps, and it marches back to a wasp burrow where the wasp then lays an egg on it, and the egg hatches and consumes the paralyzed but still alive cockroach over a long period of time, or not a long period of time, but enough to where the larva has time to grow into an adult itself, having fed on the cockroach. That's a particular example to answer your question of something that I would love to experience sometime, but probably never will. Paige Penrose says, do you have a favorite butterfly or moth species? These are all sort of unscripted and everything. A favorite butterfly or moth? I'm a huge fan of the species Argema mitrii, the Madagascar moon moth. I hatched some out many, many years ago. Their cocoons are white and they look like an oval netting over, I don't know if you've seen those mushrooms, maybe they're stinkhorns, I can't remember, but they have this netting that goes down to the ground. The cocoons kind of look like that. It's probably a poor analogy because you're probably, being bug people, even less familiar with mushrooms than you are with insects. But those big cocoons, I mean, you know something huge is going to come out of it. And of course, I knew what it was going to be, but I hatched them out, Argema mitrii. They are moths like this long, and the tails of them comprise about 50% of that height. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful moth. Google it, and you'll love it too, and you'll see why that's the answer to this question, even though I could give you probably 100 other answers rather quickly about some of my local moths that I love, and then some other natives here in the United States, both butterflies and moths. I'm also particularly enamored with buckeye butterflies. Since I saw them in a field guide when I was a kid, I have always loved them, and I think only once have I ever encountered a rather tattered specimen myself in the wild. So that's one that is also sort of near and dear to my heart, and I could go on with countless other examples, but we'll move on to Ginge Charmander, who was the last contest winner, or one of the 3 winners. Thank you very much for participating. I think you've won twice now. What has been your favorite display tank design? Okay, I actually have an answer to this question. On Mantid Forum years ago, I don't remember who posted this, but my all-time favorite tank that I've ever seen was one that the maker named, I think it was Spore World, and he had taken all of these funny little sponges that I think he got from the dollar store. There were all sorts of different colors, and maybe they were like scrubbing sponges for like dishes or something like that, but they were like pink and blue and green, a bunch of different colors, and he put these little sponges up on the ends of these narrow sticks. And so in this tank, it looked like a bunch of mushrooms. I mean, it was a big tank too. And I think maybe he had ghost mantises in there. I don't remember exactly, but it was a really, really novel idea. It sort of ticked a lot of boxes. Not only did it look just amazing, it just an alien landscape out of this world. I loved that aspect of it, but it had an incredible functionality too. These were sponges, and you could spray those, and they would help to maintain humidity in the enclosure. They were a source of moisture if the mantises wanted to drink off of them. They also provided many molting areas in the cage. With the mantises, they could hang from the bottoms of them. Sponges are very textured. They were more like foam sponges. They weren't that really super porous, kind of sponge. So I wish I could just show you a picture of it right now. I know it's on Mantid Forum. If you guys want to type in Spore World, maybe you can find it. I think I have that name right. That's my all-time favorite tank design. Or if you don't do a lot of displays, what is your favorite insect to introduce to people who don't have experience in the hobby? A lot of people are familiar with mantises, and I think mantises, because of their size and their familiarity to people, even if you haven't seen one in the wild, most everybody knows what a praying mantis is. I mean, people know butterflies and ladybugs well, but nothing really seems to make an impression on the average person like bringing just a simple green mantis. It's not so alien that it intimidates them, but it impresses them, and people have enough familiarity with them and sort of the lore around them that they are immediately intrigued by them. And so that's my answer to that question. Dave Hia says, been watching you quite some time, but I'm a new subscriber. Thank you very much, Dave, for subscribing and for asking a question. When it comes to mantis business/hobby, I know you have quite the collection. Is it expensive to keep and rear all these mantises and other such critters? At one time or another, you know, I often say that I am not just a large dealer of insects, I am one of the largest buyers of them. And nearly everything that I sell, the popular things that I can't reproduce quickly enough to keep up with demand, I first purchase from other breeders, many of them past customers, many of them people who just sort of randomly contact me, whether they originally got the specimens from me or not, and say they have more than they want to deal with, and I always offer to purchase that material for them because I am in turn using it to sell to my customers for profit. And so I never just take anything for free. And so there are a lot of expenses. Obviously, my largest expense as a business, I do everything with my taxes and everything. I have an accountant, and my entire business is legitimate in that sense. There's a lot of people doing everything under the table with the hobby, you know, on a small scale and everything. I still consider myself a very small business, even though I have a couple employees that help me fill your orders every day. But there are so many expenses when you're running your own business. I mean, my profit margin is tiny. I have to ship a lot of orders, and I don't mark the bugs up that much. I buy them, and I mark them up a little bit. I try to keep them the prices as low as I can so that I both can make the person that I'm buying from happy, I can sell them as quickly as possible, make my customers happy with the lowest prices that I can, and then I can go back to my supplier again for more of them and keep that cycle going so that it's kind of a win-win-win. Supplier, middleman, customer. So that's the game for me. And the expenses are just like everywhere. I mean, everything from the electricity to run this camera, this extra nice camera that I had to get, which was better than the last one, my computers, the tape that I use for the packages, the postage. There's fees for everything. It costs me a couple $1,000s a year for my websites. I got a bill for just one of my forums a couple months ago. It was $300 and something just for hosting Mantid forum. Normally it only costs me a couple $100s to run all 3 forums. I had to write them and say, what's up with this? They wouldn't give me my money back because they said I went over the data usage for the month. But after I talked to them a lot and, you know, convinced them that it was spammers and bots that were contributing to the number of, they weren't real users on the forum. Basically I had to advocate for myself because that's how the world works. You will get walked over, stepped on if you don't make an argument for yourself in a lot of cases. And so I was able to at least get them to credit me back for the 2 months at $370 or something crazy like that, so that they would take that out of, I wouldn't have to pay for, part of the rest of this year for that. Anyway, there are tons and tons of expenses. When something dies in shipping because it got too cold or too hot, I have to replace that animal or refund the customer in accordance with the terms and conditions. It's a really tough business to be in. I don't recommend it. Part of the reason why I'm able to do it at all is because I work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, it really is pretty close to that. you know, when I go grocery shopping, I'm getting supplies for the business too. When I mean, it just goes on. It just goes on and on and on. The gas it takes me to get to the post office and back. You know, I write a lot of things off to expense, but it's a narrow margin. I pay my bills. I'm, you know, putting my daughter through college. You know, I have a car payment, and you know, but I did work for a long time to get myself debt free before I could make the jump out of UPS after working there for 19 years, so that I could start off with no debt. And that's a really important key to starting up a business. So anyway, kind of went all over the map there. Not atypical of me. Sort of answers your question though, I think. Let me just peek back a little bit. Yes, it's expensive to rear everything. I pay employees, you know, and I mean, I call it a living wage, and they are very helpful to me, and I appreciate them. And you know, people want to intern for me. I won't let anybody work for me for free. I have people that, you know, stuff the little leaf bags that I sell for $3, and I pay them $1 to put, you know, leaves in a bag for me. I mean, there's a lot of other people besides just the people who work here for me during the week who my business helps to support, all those suppliers. There's a lot going on all the time, and your orders touch not just my life, not just my daughter's life, but lots of other people, their lives. You know, one of my best suppliers, this is his only source of income, is selling to me, and your orders are important to all of us. So thank you very much. Next question here from Shaxolotl. Nice. What are good starter species of mantises you would recommend for people just starting out in the hobby, in the collecting hobby? And what would you suggest if someone was to work their way up? Okay, well, I get questions like this pretty frequently. The species that are available in the hobby, like if you can buy it, generally it's something that's relatively easy to take care of and relatively easy to breed. A few that come to mind are the Hiradula giant Asian mantises, the African sphodromantises, budwing mantises, you know, flower mantises of most any kind are relatively easy. Ghost mantises aren't as aggressive, but they're very long-lived, and if you have flying foods in particular, ghosts are very easy. In working your way up, any of the species that need high heat, like the violin mantises, thistle mantises, Blepharopsis mendica, and of course the devil's flower that I showed in the contest opener, that last video before this one. Those all require high heat. And the devil's flower in particular, I would say, of the ones that are frequently accessible, those would be the top in terms of the ones you would work your way up to. And if you're anything like me, you will just kind of like never quite get there and reproduce them with any regularity, frequency, or at all. They're tough. Sandra Volsi. Not including just roaches, have you done any communal setups? And if so, what was your favorite? I actually don't keep roaches communally. And the reason for that is that I want my roaches to not compete with each other. Because of the number of different things that I'm taking care of all the time, everything that I'm raising, with very few exceptions, I'm raising for the purposes of reproduction so that I can then sell bugs. Why do I sell bugs? Is it to pay my bills? Is it for profit? No. The basic answer is because this has always just been a hobby for me, and I sell bugs so that I can get more bugs. It just so happens that I was able to quit my job, and now through the process of running the hobby, I am also making enough to pay my bills, which just allows me to do what I love to do and to supply you guys a little bit better than I used to when I had to leave the house for 8 to 10 hours every day to work a day job. So I have a lot of communal setups, and I don't necessarily start communal setups intentionally, but I often sort of I'll get a new shipment of something in, and I'll put them in with something else as in terms of a temporary holding tank, and then sometimes they will reproduce in there along with something else. So I will frequently have communal tanks that include millipedes and isopods and springtails. Sometimes the Vanones harvestmen are communal with other things. I would say that those are probably the only communal tanks that I can think of off the top of my head. So, and I'll be doing lots more videos on communal tanks because it's a really hot topic for the hobby. And my favorite tanks, of course, to look at are communal ones where there's a variety of organisms moving around in them and coexisting. Bioactive tanks, they're often known as. I Quit It says, what's a bug that you've been hesitant to hold in the past? Congrats to this week's winners, by the way. It's very nice of you, I Quit It, and good to see you back for this contest. When I was down in Arizona 2 years ago, we visited one of the premier centipede hobbyists in the United States. And my friend Jesse Green, who you see on lots of the Arizona trip videos with me, and also who is sponsoring the stag beetle pin for this contest, we were visiting Wyatt, and he's a very celebrated centipede hobbyist with lots of experience, and his dad's involved with ants. He's a super neat guy, and I wish we had more time to spend with him. Actually, the rest of the guys on the trip did spend more time with him, but my appendix decided to give out in the middle of the desert, and I spent the last 2 days in the hospital that trip. And so when we were visiting him and he was showing us his centipedes, and you can see some of this footage on my Instagram channel from probably September 2 years ago. So September 2018, if you go to my Instagram channel. He was holding some Scolopendra Heros centipedes, and Jesse took it from his hand. It was on the first day of our trip, and my hands are very valuable tools for me. I don't get to go down to Arizona in the middle of bug season, the best place at the best time very often. And narrow as the chance may be that the centipede that Wyatt has held a million times and that Jesse in turn held without being bitten, narrow as the possibility was that it would bite me, I just didn't want to take the chance. That's the answer to the question. Liam says, do you have a favorite or least favorite feeder insect? Sorry if you've answered this question before, I'm new to the channel. I really appreciate repeat questions from new people. It's a great place to start, and I don't actually recall anybody asking me what my favorite feeder insect is. Now, that's not a question that I can simply answer because it depends on what kind of predatory pet bug is being fed. If it's a mantis, my favorite feeder insect is probably the housefly, because that's the one that's the most useful for the sizes of mantises that I tend to have. If it's a tarantula, I like crickets. They just generate the best feeding response, even a better feeding response than roaches. But roaches are really the most versatile of all of those. They don't have the die-off problems that crickets have. They don't in turn stink when they die like crickets do. We all know about that if we've ever used them as feeders. Many of you have. Flies, whether it's fruit flies, house flies, or blue bottle flies, or soldier flies, working through their life cycle can be a little bit difficult. Their shelf life is a little bit shorter versus roaches. Roaches are just wonderful in that they often start out small and then, you know, they grow rather quickly. You start out with a colony of them, so you have different sizes available generally. They're just good, strong, healthy feeders. So the Turkestan roach is my favorite because they don't burrow. They're also called red runners. I just really like them. They move quickly. They just generate a really wonderful feeding response in everything from mantises to arachnids to centipedes, basically everything. Having said all of that, I do have all of these feeders around all of the time, and the best thing you can do is to have them all around, because then you have the maximum number of options. But I hope I've answered your question, Liam, and thanks again for participating in the contest. Wayne Nemec, I've gotten to know Wayne a little bit here through the last couple weeks. He's been a regular customer through the website a few times over. Thank you for coming into the contest here, Wayne. He says, hello there, what species of insect, arachnid, or other bug that you do not currently breed and sell do I wish to have in the future? Let's see. I'm struggling because I'm thinking of all the wonderful things that I just got that you guys don't even know about yet that I'm breeding. I just posted a video the other day of Porcelio expansus, which I nicknamed on the website the Beetlejuice isopod, and then put a fun little video on YouTube with some Beetlejuice music in the background, which I can't do here on YouTube because they'll slap me down for copyright issues, and Instagram will too to some extent, but anyway. Okay, well, you know, the rubber ducky isopods, that's probably a good answer. I mean, part of the reason is because everybody else wants them. Part of the reason is because so many other people already have them. They are here, they are being reproduced, and is it my turn yet? I don't know. There you go, Wayne. Theropods on YouTube. Do you keep any tarantulas? If so, which ones and how many? If not, what would you think is the best starter scorpion? I'm not a big tarantula keeper. I've never really gone in that direction. I guess before I ran a business called Bugs in Cyberspace, I had a business with a friend called Mysterious Creatures, and we were primarily tarantula dealers back then, I would say. But because there were so many other tarantula dealers when I started my business, and because there continue to be, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are really. I always say like 80% of the hobby are tarantula keepers. I have never really tried to compete with those people, and so I wanted to, you know, be able to do something and survive and not just disappear like, you know, 99 out of 100 tarantula dealers do. I wanted to distinguish myself, to diversify and offer different things, and you know, I really do like all the other animals slightly better, to be honest, because they are more handleable, you know, for children, for classrooms. You know, I love tarantulas. I love their size and everything, but for a whole bunch of reasons, I don't have a lot of tarantulas. I have a rose hair that is an adult female, and I have a Mexican red knee that is probably 2/3 grown. And then I have a rotating small selection of slings that I offer through the website just for my customers who might want to add a tarantula to their collection in conjunction with their order for something else. And so I have, this week I have some Aphanopelma hensi coming in and some more curly hair slings. So, and to answer your other question, what's the best starter scorpion? I like any of the little desert species. The striped tails are very aggressive, very defensive, really fun to watch. But you know, a desert hairy, an emperor, an Asian forest scorpion, if you can get your hands on the emperors, they're pretty awesome. They're not as easy to source as they used to be. And so, you know, the desert hairy is really my top recommendation for size. It's our largest US species, and I think they're really beautiful. What's the one species you've never quite been able to make work out, i.e. hard to care for? The one that I opened the video with, the devil's flower. Those mantises are just really tough. You know, it's a long road. I mean, people complain about the lifespan of mantises being only a year or slightly more, but that's a long time to devote to a small number of individuals of something, and then to have them mismolt at the end. You really have to have the heat high in order to grow them, you know, optimally, quickly. And when you're working with high heat in an animal that sheds its skin, the dryness, if you take your eye off the ball for, you know, a day or two, and your humidity drops in conjunction with that hot, dry cage, and your molting platforms are not perfect, all that work that you put months into, it goes down the drain with a mismolt, and it can be very frustrating. So, that was Santiago's question. Joseph Oakley, what would you recommend as a beginner species of millipede? Loving the vids, keep it up. Thank you very much for that, Joseph. A beginner species of millipede, my normal recommendation are the ivory millipedes. I've been having a lot of success lately in growing up Centrobolus splendidus. I did a fun little splendid table video on Instagram the other day, if any of you are familiar with that American public media or public broadcasting show. It's on the weekends, I think, and if you are a sort of a talk radio nerd like I am, or a public broadcasting lover like I am, then you may be familiar with it. But so the ivory millipede is a big recommendation. Easy to care for, long-lived, surface active, and just generally beautiful. Shed Ninja 342, what got you into the insect keeping hobby? This is a question that I'm asked a lot, so I'll keep it brief because a lot of you have heard it already. But you know, I was always interested in insects from the earliest age, and I mean the earliest. My parents have stories that I've told here on Instagram before about me, you know, interacting with insects from the youngest age, and my parents reading me books and everything from an early age. I didn't want, you know, nursery rhymes or, you know, stories about, you know, princes and princesses, things like that. I wanted, you know, textbooks about bugs, and they catered to that and supported my interest in that. And what specifically got me into keeping bugs as pets was that back in the 90s, well, even before then, they had them in the 80s in the pet stores too, but in the 90s they started having some stick insects available in shops here around the Portland, Oregon area where I live. And at about that same time, the internet was just becoming a thing. And I got online and found out that there were lots of other stick insect species that I could acquire. And so I traded the eggs from my stick insects for other stick insects, and started a website up about stick insects originally. A long time ago, my website was called something else, around phasmids. So let's see here. Next question from Lois King. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Most people think I am a bit different for being fascinated by the world of insects and arachnids. I would like to see more about fruit flies, their care and feeding. Can they be shipped safely during the winter months? I did a rather exhaustive video on that topic recently, and I think this is the side of the screen that I point to, where you can click this link up here, this card, and go and watch that video. Can they be shipped safely during the winter months? Well, it's an interesting question, and from my perspective, it depends on where you live. If you live in a southern state like Florida through Texas to California, this winter is probably the best time of year to ship to you. If you are living in the frigid north, and especially the Midwest in a 2-day zip code, this may not be the best time of year to ship to you. Generally, I will ship if the temperatures go down to like the mid-20s through the overnight lows. But I like to see a customer's zip code and to, as I like to say, make a science of your weather forecast and the time in transit before committing to offering you a live guarantee. Thank you for your question, Lois, and shoot me an email and with your zip code, please. Spirits Collectathon. Do you think it is a good idea to get into the arthropod breeding and selling, my mouth is getting a bit dry here, breeding and selling business, or do you think it would be too much of an undertaking for your everyday bug owner? You know, I mean, more power to you if you want to do it. I said this in when someone asked this question in the last contest. Don't put too much pressure on yourself about it. Start by breeding one thing and selling one thing. And if you can do it with one thing, try doing it with two things. And that's how I built my business. I just started out very slowly, one species at a time, one customer at a time. And regardless of the size of your business, it's always best to take everything one question at a time, one email at a time, one order at a time, one bug at a time. So try it that way, see how it goes. And through making mistakes, we learn lots of things. And as I often say, I continue to learn and relearn all of my lessons. Lynn Certon says, hey there, I've received some mantises from you back in early April, and they're still doing great. I love my 2 girls. Anyways, my question is, how much time a day does this business take up? I know that taking care of animals as a profession is typically a round-the-clock thing. Even before I started my business, I was taking care of my bugs all day long, and it was an all-day thing. And before I started my website back in 1997, I would spend 8 hours a day answering emails. And in fact, that's the reason that I started my website. I wanted to put my care sheets up there and my information up there so that I didn't have to type out a 2-page letter to everybody that I was enthusiastically writing back and forth with all the time in that new age of the internet. She goes on to say, assuming that Lynn Certon is female, I don't even know what that picture is over there. I know you collect a lot of your specimens out and about as well. That's actually not true. I don't collect a lot of them. I do collect some. Is there ever any room for vacations or breaks? As the saying goes, when you're doing what you love, you never work another day in your life. And so in some sense, I am always on vacation, I am always on break, and I am always at work. I do love what I do. I am not ashamed to admit that. It's just a pleasure every day to wake up and check my orders, to check my emails, to check YouTube, to check the forums, to check Instagram, to check TikTok, to see what's going on. It does feel overwhelming at times, and I literally do, before I do anything else, I turn my computer on. Often, you know, I time my getting up to where my employees are coming in. I get up shortly before they're going to arrive, rather last minute. And then, you know, I just start working immediately. And it's what I like to do. And so it takes up the entire day. It is now 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night. And I'm answering your questions. I asked for this, and you guys showed up, and I'm very grateful for that. There's a million other things that I could be doing with my Friday nights, but this is what I enjoy doing, and for now, this is what I want to do. And the way I spend my days is how I want to spend them. And I don't see any of this changing in the near future because I don't want it to. So, yeah, it's a round the clock thing. It's a 7-day-a-week thing. And I made it this way. And, you know, my parents live in Mexico in a nice home, and there's an extra room there for me anytime I want to give this all up and just go down there and live with them for the rest of our lives. And who knows, you know, maybe I'll just snap one day and you'll go to the Bugs in Cyberspace YouTube channel and there'll just be like static on the screen or something. You don't know. We never know. So thank you for your question, Linzerton. Zachary Wagner. Oh, I was going to go get a drink of water. I'm going to pause the camera and go get myself a drink of water before I continue on with this. So I had me a nice little break there, and I figured I'd get a little mascot here for the next part of our video. I went and had that water and unloaded my dishwasher. Position myself here. And where were we? Linzerton Zachary Wagner. 2 hours ago, it says. Well, I haven't refreshed the screen, I guess. Do you think there's any hope for the importation of stag beetles in the future, such as from Japan? Or do you think the blanket banning of exotic herbivorous insects will remain? I am quite certain that the blanket banning of exotic beetles and similar kinds of insects that eat plants will remain. And I would go so far as to say I think that it should remain. I have at times in the past gone through phases where I was frustrated by not being able to keep stick insects and leaf insects without permits, and I ended up giving up all of my stick and leaf insects because I didn't have permits for them. I'm on record for having said that I have raised over 100 species of them. The vast majority of them, and this was in a previous life, were not native species. And prior to 9/11, back in the wild west days of the internet, I used to import them back and forth. And you are supposed to have permits for that sort of thing. And, you know, I never got in trouble for it, but I stopped doing it because there was always an air of paranoia that involved the process of bringing something in. And I never liked the way that felt. And I heard about people getting in trouble for doing that, and the fines can be quite severe for importing. Doesn't matter if it's a plant-eating insect. If you're importing anything living, even seeds from plants, for example, you're subject to the same customs regulations. You can't import any sort of biological material, even if it's dead stock. Because even dead stock, dead insects could be harboring other small things that could potentially affect crops. And I'll go a little further than that even and say that my feelings on it are a little bit more severe even than what the Department of Agriculture legislates or regulates. They don't legislate, they regulate, but according to them, it's okay to release Chinese mantises because it's an established species here in the United States. I would never release a Chinese mantis into my backyard. I have an enormous respect for the ecosystem, fragile, damaged as it is here in the city of Portland. We live in a very green state, and you probably saw outside my window earlier in the day how green and beautiful it is out there. Now my trees are covered in English ivy, which isn't native here. There are blackberry bushes, Himalayan blackberry, all over the neighborhood and the state. So many other non-native invasive things. I personally will not release anything into my yard. I mean, anything at all, really, even if it were native. I would never release anything into the yard that came from indoors. I forgot the mantis was on my hat. I felt something tickling my ear. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. I can feel it. Back up here where people can see you and where you won't startle me. I do forget. I forgot earlier that that other mantis was on my head when it was the devil's flower, when I made the contest announcement video. And after I was done with the video, I forgot the mantis was on my hat. And I swear, like maybe 30 or 45 minutes went by before I got up from the computer when I was processing the video and walking away. I forgot that the mantis was on my hat at all. And anyway, as I stood up, it occurred to me that there was a mantis because I saw the container sitting there. So where was I? Even the pill and sow bugs, Porcellio scaber and Armadillidium vulgare, the ones that roll up into a ball in our backyards, those are not native species. And so I would not even release one of those into the local environment because I have an enormous respect for the uniqueness, the individuality of each niche, each local ecosystem, you know, and what I have here isn't necessarily the same as what we have out in the deserts of Oregon or up near Mount Hood at elevation or out at the Oregon coast. These are all distinct ecosystems, and as you move up and down the coast, it changes. You know, so I mean, I am fine with the way the regulations are. I like that we can loosely move some of the native species and the captive bred specimens that are from other countries around the country in some cases. Now, I don't do any work at all with exotic beetles or stick and leaf insects or, you know, there's a lot of other groups that I don't do anything with, but you know, certain things have been moved around the country for the entire time I've been in the online hobby, and I've never heard of anybody getting in trouble for them. And I have had the USDA come to the house before, and I've had conversations with them about what is and isn't okay. And so, you know, I mean, I don't make the rules, but it's important that we do follow them, you know, for ourselves and for our hobby. We have a lot of wonderful species here in the United States. I am a patriot in one sense of the word, in that I love our native, our domestic insects and arthropods. We live in a very large country with a huge range of habitats, ecosystems. We have wonderful deserts with fascinating desert species, and you know, things that live only in cold places, things that live only in wet places. There's just so much to work with here, and it's accessible and doesn't fall under the same regulations in a lot of cases. I don't do anything with snails, even if they are domestic or native species, for example, or even native stick insects. But you know, no grasshoppers, nothing like that. So yeah, I'm fine with the way the rules are, and you know, it would be interesting. You know, there isn't a budget for them to study everything on a case-by-case basis, so I understand and accept why they have blanket legislation about certain groups like stick insects, where they say, you know, we can't study these on a case-by-case basis to figure out whether they could establish in all or certain parts of the United States. The Indian stick insect, Carausius morosus, for example, has established in California off and on, and you know, for 15 or 20 years that I know of. Someone just sent me a picture the other day on Instagram and said, do you know what these are? I collected this outside, and it was an Indian stick insect with the red armpits, Carausius morosus. And so, interestingly, sometimes even the scientists and our regulatory agencies will make a mistake. It happened here in the Portland area recently, where they had released, I think, a beetle or hemipteran species, I can't remember which it was, to combat purple loosestrife, I think it was, an invasive non-native plant. And I think they released it over in a park called Oaks Bottom here in Portland. And it made the news one day when a bunch of people in that neighborhood, their entire yards were defoliated of vegetation on account of this beetle, because the science didn't realize that the organism was going to feed on all of these other plants, because, you know, there's only so much testing they can do before they make a determination like that. And so a lot of things that are established in the United States are here because, you know, by permission or by accident, something to do with the government. I think Turkestan roaches, the red runners, they established in this country on account of coming back on vehicles that were over in the Middle East for military reasons. So anyway, let's go on here. Ashley Silver says, this is kind of a silly question, but do you ever give names to individual insects in your collection? I've answered this question before. I'll give you the short answer again here. Generally, no, but very occasionally, one of our sponsors, the Portland Insectarium, you saw the coloring and activity book, that's the second place prize for this contest. They will borrow something from me for one of their events, and they always give names. These are public events where, you know, they educate the local community here in Portland about bugs, and so they will give names to the bugs that I share with them for the events. And so sometimes I will name them, because if I don't, the bugs will come back with these names that are, in my opinion, well, let's just say they're very interesting and fun, and not always the names that I would choose for them. So sometimes, just for fun, I will give something a name, just so that I can have some say in what the name of it is. Thank you for your question, Ashley. Robert Lamb, he just popped in here to say thank you so much, because he was one of the winners in the last contest. So I don't see that he asked a question here, or did he? He did not. So it's not too late, Robert. Get in on it while the getting's good. September Blues. Peter, have you heard of people who marry inanimate objects, like someone married the Eiffel Tower? Well, my question is, would you ever consider marrying a bug? And hypothetically speaking, what human-like characteristics would this bug have that would make her a perfect mate? What makes you think it would be a female bug? I always like to dream big, and I have seen you dine with bugs, so maybe I am onto something here, like maybe predicting the future. Haha, hey, I really would like to hear your thoughts, fingers crossed. I know you might not answer yet another off-the-wall question from me. Read more, click. But hey, it's worth a try. A little fun. Okay, well, I'm already choking up at the question here. If I were going to marry a bug, just backing up to the snide little comment I made, it wouldn't matter if it was a male or female. I just sort of categorically would not do it, and that is simply because I've been married twice before, and I just cannot conceive of being married again at this time. Not because I don't love other people or bugs, but because I'm just not in that frame of mind right now. So that's an answer in time and space for you. Bill Kinney, I would really like to keep feigning death beetles. I have set up a ZoomEd 5-gallon long tank for a desert environment. Wanted to know how many beetles I could keep in this size enclosure and what temperature the tank should be maintained at. Does one side need to be warmer than the other? A 5-gallon tank. I'm not familiar with the ZoomEd 5-gallon long tank. So I would really need to know what the specific dimensions were of that tank. I mean, I can conceive in my mind what a 5-gallon tank, but you called it a long tank, so it sounds like it might be long and shallow. I'm not really sure. Room temperature is generally fine for the death feigning beetles. A little bit of heat doesn't matter. Obviously, they come from a desert environment and they are most active in the warmest months of the year, and so some heat will probably promote activity in your pet tank. But I'm hesitant to really, I mean, because if it's a long tank that has a lot more surface area, then you can keep more beetles in it. And if you put hides in there, pieces of bark or little things for them to climb on maybe, that increases the number of beetles that you can have in the tank. They're not going to burrow or anything like that, so substrate depth isn't important. But they do like to have things to hide under. And you will, if you had a piece of bark this big and it was the only piece of bark in your tank, you would find that if you had 20 of them in there, that they would, all 20 of them, pile up right next to each other during the hottest hours of the day. They will sort of approximate their normal daily night-day cycle in a tank. Even if it's cool in the house, they'll follow the same sort of day and night pattern that they would in the desert. So, just ballpark answer, I would say that 5 is a pretty good number for a 5-gallon tank, regardless of what the dimensions are. But you could go a lot more than that, and you could go fewer if you prefer it. But feel free to send me a photo on Instagram or through email, and I will be happy to take a look at the tank and on that basis give you a more perfect answer. Thank you, Bill. Rory Donahoe. Big fan and frequent mantis shopper. I appreciate that, Rory. Thank you very much. If one of your longtime pet mantises grew to the size of a car, do you think it would recognize you and not eat you? I mean, I think it would eat me regardless of whether it recognized me or not. Mantises, while this one here, for example, knows that I am not food, if anything smaller than it were to cruise by, even while it were on my hand, a fly, for example, and you'll see lots of videos if you follow my Instagram channel, where I also have a fly and a mantis on my hand, that the mantis will attack the fly and not my hand. And so certainly I would become prey if I were small enough to be a food for a mantis. And what was the other part of your question here? Also, where in the world do you think you could find the best assortment of interesting wild bugs? So if I wanted to travel to somewhere to see bugs, Madagascar comes to mind, of course, because I did the Madagascar hissing cockroach video recently, just a few days ago. But I've always wanted to go to Borneo or Sumatra. I read a book a long time ago called The Malay Archipelago by Alfred Russel Wallace. And it was just a really inspiring book to read about all of the wonderful places he visits. And I'm a big fan of strange foods and cultures. and just observing how the people in places live and interacting with them in other places. And I would love to follow in his footsteps in the sense of visiting all of these places. Now, it would have been much more interesting to do it 150 years ago, but it would also be interesting to do it now. And so, you could probably look online and see all of the places that he went, but there's so many islands down there. But Java, Sumatra, Borneo especially, those are places that I would love to visit, and perhaps someday I will. Also, Papua New Guinea. How many insects would you say you usually get in a night? This is Jingles Roth, and I suspect that they are referring to when I black light. I generally don't keep a whole lot of things, whether I go out looking for bugs. You'll see on Instagram sometimes that I go out with friends and I will just do the live feed while we walk around and look for things. There are some crimes of opportunity that occur when I see a millipede, and I know there are a gazillion of them that live out there. Same thing with the trapdoor spiders. I'll walk past 100 burrows of them and occasionally dig one up while I'm on video and say it's for sale. So, it just sort of depends. I don't even remember the last time that I went out to collect. It is mid-January now, and it's been a few months since I went out because we are in the down season right now, and I do miss being outside. Next question here is by Luce. Peter, I know you have grown up in the Pacific Northwest and have endured years of bugless seasons. Have you ever seriously considered moving to a new area where bugs are available year-round? If so, what places have you considered? I have considered moving to other places. I very nearly moved to Arizona one year. While I was working at UPS, put in for a transfer request, and I was this close to the whole thing going through, but then I canceled it at the very last moment. But even in Arizona, the bug season, arguably, actually, is shorter in Arizona than it is here in Oregon, where I live. But the bugs that come out are much more interesting and larger and showier. And so, as far as there being another place in the country, I mean, the seasons do change. Florida is probably the best place to live if you want to see bugs year-round. Dylan YT, Dylan YouTube. Do you take care of all pill bugs the same, except for humidity and temperature? And where would I find a care guide? There is a book that I saw on the website about isopod care, and I don't think it's out yet, but I know Oren McMonigal is working on a larger isopod book that's going to be a hardcover, I believe, or perhaps it's just a larger version of the soft cover. Don't remember. I was on the phone with him last week and he mentioned it, but we talked for a long time about a lot of things. Do you care for pill bugs the same? I personally do offer the same care for nearly every isopod species that I keep, with the exception of a few that like it drier. But as far as pill bugs, I keep them all the same, a little drier on average than I keep the sow bugs. Aaron Bob. Hey Peter, curious about your favorite examples of sexual dimorphism in insects. Is there a species that you find to be particularly interesting, extreme, or weird? The one that just comes to mind immediately are the orchid mantises. We've talked about them a little bit here on YouTube in the last couple of months. The females are, sexual dimorphism, by the way, means two different shapes, dimorphism, in the sexes, the males and the females. And so in the orchid mantises, the females are about this long and the males are only about this long. Leaf insects are quite interesting too. The females are very large and not capable of flight. You know, their bodies can be like anywhere from this to this for some of the species. And the males are very slender and have a body shape sort of like this. How about like that? Well, like that. And they're smaller bodied, lighter bodied, and winged. And so they are, while the females are not capable of flight, they don't have flying wings, the males are capable of flight and use their wings to fly and find the females. Armed reptile is the setup required to keep Eublaberus posticus, orange-headed roaches, similar to how hissers are kept. You can keep them exactly the same if you want to. I do recommend a substrate. The Eublaberus will burrow in a deeper substrate. They do like to have something to hide under. The hissers, at no point do they ever burrow, and so, you know, you don't actually need to offer them a substrate. I think it's important, especially for the Eublaberus posticus, to offer them some hiding places in there. There's a lot of wing biting that occurs in that species. And so in terms of the setup, you want to feed them more protein foods because they will nibble at each other a lot, and maybe keep them in smaller numbers if, you know, what their wings look like is important to you. You know, if you're setting up a pet tank of them, you know, give them some room to get away from each other, some climbing structures, make sure that their wings are molting properly. The hissers obviously don't have wings. The posticus can molt just fine in the substrate without some climbing structures on them, but sometimes the wing biting may occur shortly after their molt. The others will come along and start to nibble at them, and probably the males will you know, go after the females, sometimes before they're molting, sometimes after they're molting, sometimes during their molting. So if you want pretty posticus, you know, you might keep the larger nymphs that you think are about to molt to maturity. If you want them to be pretty, keep them in lower numbers. The hissers are fine being kept together. You will almost never see any sort of damage to them. Maybe over time, if there are tons and tons of them, you'll see their antennae break off in older individuals. Where's the mantis? So yeah, I mean, you can keep them exactly the same though. Low. You see these females, they are much less inclined to fly. Wow, she just went cruising there. I don't even know where she went. Oh, there you are. Come here. Let's see here. Puppy Mint Mocha. She was 4th place in the last contest. Wow, you're getting so active now. Come here. Come here. Oh, you're gonna get a little bit spunky now, huh? Okay, well, I'll leave you down there for a moment. She's doing her startled display at me, and so she actually struck at me a few times. I'm just gonna leave her be down there for a moment until she settles down. 4th place, so close for the last contest. For my question, is there anything in the bug hobby that a lot of people do that you disagree with, or maybe just irks you a little bit? You know, it's, for many years, while I was at UPS and growing up in my family home where there were shelves and shelves of self-help books and motivational books and things like that. My dad was an entrepreneur and consumed a lot of that sort of material. I should pull the camera off and show you what this mantis looks right now. In fact, I'll do that. We'll come back to that other thing I was saying here in just a moment. But you got to check out this mantis here because she's pretty riled up at the moment. The lighting isn't really great down here, but check her out. I tried to pick her up and she wasn't having it. You can see that her mouth is open. There's actually some color there in her mouth. If the lighting were better, you'd be able to see it, but that's part of her startle display. She's got her colors out there in her abdomen, and she's kind of rocking back and forth. And I'll show you what it looks like here if we approach her. And so I'll just touch her leg. You see her strike at me there? She says, "Leave me alone. I've had enough hat adventures for one day." And so we'll do that. We'll leave her be. But it was an interesting little performance, wasn't it? I think that's about where the camera was. And so I was talking about my disinclination to think about things that are sort of negative and to put myself in a position of being irked. It's just not my nature. And part of that is nature, and part of it is nurture. And by nurture, I mean both my parents and just my own commitment in myself not to focus on negativity and things that bother me. But I will try to put myself in the right mood here to answer this question. Anything in the bug hobby that a lot of people do that I disagree with, or maybe that just irks me a little bit? Okay, I mean, I got one for you based on a question that was asked a little while ago. It does bother me when people release certain things into the environment. I get questions from customers, potential customers, every once in a while who order something because they want to film it for one reason or another. And they say, don't worry, no harm will come to this. I'll be releasing it outdoors when I'm done. And at that point I have to tell them, you know, I can't sell this to you on that basis. I cannot advocate the release of something that's not native to your area. And even if it were a species that were native to their area, it didn't necessarily come from their area. And so there may be genetic differences in the population of the same species that occur in their area. And so from my perspective, releasing it into the wild so that it interbreeds with its genes mixed with the genes of the ones from the local environment, that would be sort of a crime against nature in a way. So that's about, on the fly here, that's about the most justice I can do to that question without getting myself in trouble with people that I care about. LAP reptiles. What bug species that are able to be bred in captivity have the most genetic variety? By this I mean I really enjoy breeding products, and I'd love to breed more species of bug. However, I'd like to know some more bugs with a lot of easy distinguishable traits. For example, I'd love to begin breeding isopods, as there are a lot of morphs like zebra. What other bugs would you know of that have a lot of promise for cool breeding projects that have different offspring? Well, I mean, I would have to say, and this kind of follows up on the last question a little bit, you asked what bug species are able to be bred in captivity that have the most genetic variety. Typically, I mean, you don't really mean genetic variety, you mean like phenotypic or expressed or visible variety in the way they look. If you wanted genetic variety, you'd want to get, like I said in the last thing, you know, things for different populations from around their geographic area, and then breed them together because they would have different genes maybe from those different areas. Anyway, as far as I know, just off the top of my head, aside from the isopods, which are well documented for almost 20 years now, people have been isolating traits, colors, patterns, maybe sizes in them to some small extent. Besides that, there are a few roaches that have been bred for color forms. Gyna lurida, the yellow form, they're called porcelain roaches, but there's a mostly true breeding yellow form that I believe it was Orrin McMonagle, like 99% sure. He was the one who did it. They pretty much just reproduce yellow specimens. They throw a few of the normal porcelain or brownish ones every once in a while, but they're mostly true breeding. Other than that, the millipede, there's Periplaneta americana, the white-eye roaches. You will read in Oren's books that they were discovered in a well somewhere, and I can't remember where he got them from, but he's been raising these for many years. They're a white eye strain of the American cockroach that was only known from one location and is probably only still around because of his efforts in distributing them to a couple different people. I don't have any presently. And then also Narcissus americanus, the albino form. He is responsible for those being in the hobby every now and then. A millipede that isn't, I don't think, a true albino, but they are leucistic, or they are a very pale color form of the normal Narcissus americanus millipedes. So those are a few things that you could work with. Generally, things that give birth to multiple clutches per year, lots of babies, and that reproduce a lot. And the time between clutches is short, and they have lots of babies. Those are things that are sort of necessary for any captive breeding program that's going to be worthwhile in terms of producing different colors of things. It just doesn't happen with a lot of things. And so, that is one of the most interesting margins or fronts in the hobby, but there's just not a lot of work being done with that outside of the isopod hobby, because you're talking about years and years and years of dedicated efforts in culling out certain color forms from one generation to another and then interbreeding them. I've known people to try it with so many different things, including mantises, and I haven't seen anybody make any progress on that front. So, next question from Leah. How's our mantis doing down here? Still in startled display. I took care of a praying mantis at my summer job last year, a European mantis, I believe, because of the black and white dots on the inner arms. Exactly. And one of my favorite things to do with her was let her ride on my hat. That's funny. I didn't even see this question before I put this one on my hat earlier. While I was working, people loved her, especially the kids. I do a lot of educational programs, mainly geared towards kids, and I was wondering what your favorite insect facts I could teach to them. I mainly deal with animals native or invasive to Connecticut, but I'm open to facts on others as well. This is a tricky one to answer just on the fly here without a little bit of preparation, because I'm not really sure what is native or not native to your state just off the top of my head. Sorry about that. I would generally recommend in cases like this where someone emails me, because usually they're asking about things that I have on the website, that you look through the website and ask me questions on sort of a species by species basis about whether something is suitable to that particular application. Educating people, you tend to want things that are large if you're presenting them to audiences, especially when it comes to bugs. They need to be able to see them if there's a group of people, and so generally the bigger the better, depending on how the format is for, if they're coming up to them one at a time, then you can get away with showing them smaller things. One that comes to mind in terms of insect facts, just because I can't go on too long in answering this question, are the Simondoa cave roaches that I did a video of a few days ago. What a great ambassador they are to telling a story about the impact of humans on species on this planet. Watch that video, and I'm certain that it will inspire you as much as it would inspire the people you are teaching about bugs. So check that out, Leah. Thank you for your question. And Danny Boy, question from an aspiring entomologist. What bug hobby job types are there, and how can young teens and kids start their insect education adventures? Leah, in the very last question here, said she did education programs, mainly geared towards kids. I think it would be really wonderful if you are a student in school, Danny, or even if you're not in school, if you're older, to just take the bugs around like Leah does and do education programs. You can do these in classrooms. Just contact the schools and say, let them know what you do. That maybe ask them if you can send them an email, or just send them an email and show pictures of what you have, and maybe have a write-up about the things that you want to teach or can teach them about the insects. Every school has a science classroom or a biology classroom, and so you could do it that way. Libraries, especially summer events, summer programs at various schools. Daycares are a good place to check in at too, because a lot of children, young children, are in daycares during the day, especially in the summer months. Youth groups of various kinds, churches, things like that. So those would be my best recommendations. You could also, as a bug hobby job, I feel like the mantis is tickling me again on my head, but it's not. It's on the floor over here, still startled. Where was I? Another bug hobby job. Just try breeding something, perhaps. I rely on breeders, and I purchase material from people on a very regular basis. And so you might try doing some breeding, and you can check in with me for some ideas of things that breed easily. And ghost mantises are always rather easy, and if I had someone to buy them from at this very moment, I would, which reminds me, there's someone that I know here that I can reach out to, and probably should. So those are a few ideas for you right there. I'm going to hit refresh on the screen here, because although I'm getting thirsty again here, I think I'm nearly caught up on questions. We now have 143 views, and sort by newest first. And we'll see, there's just a couple more that have come in. What is the strangest insect you've come across or learned about, be it looks, behavior, life cycle, etc.? From Action Guy 95. Strangest insect you've come across. There's these ones called Texas beetles. Spectra, that's the genus. A long time ago, somebody sent me a larva, and if you're watching, reach out to me. I know you don't live down there in California anymore where you found it, but say hi. I haven't talked to you for a long time. The larvae of this beetle, the adults are not very interesting looking. Compared to other beetles. They're interesting in their own right, of course, but the larvae of them are sort of an oval shape, maybe a centimeter long, and they've got all these little flanges / bristles that line the perimeter of their bodies, and then at the terminal end of their body, there's like this little spike that comes up off the back end. It looks like an ovipositor or a stinger, I suppose you could say. And they are just the most alien looking things that I could think of. I was thinking about owl fly larvae when I was first going to answer this question, because I love owl flies, and the adults themselves are also very strange looking, like a cross between a butterfly and a lacewing and a damselfly or dragonfly. And so, but then I thought of the Brachyspectra larva, because their larvae look very similar to antlion larvae. So, sorry I can't show any pictures right here on the fly like this, but Google it if you're interested in seeing those things. If you actually are the type to go and do that, I assure you, you won't be disappointed. So, next question. Benjamin Gravetto. Great video as usual. Sorry I haven't been commenting much. I do recognize your name from recently, but I just got 8 new mantids, so I've been busy. My question is, what would be the most enjoyable pet you have ever kept? Could be a species, not just one. And why did you enjoy them so much? Oh, what a tough question. I mean, this is right up there with the, what's your favorite? You know, I can't pick a favorite. I can't pick a most enjoyable. I'm gonna try to work up to being able to answer these questions for you guys with answers that aren't real, just for the sake of having answers. But I'm sort of new to this, answering questions, just live on YouTube like this. I mean, it feels live for me because I'm not going to go back and, edit this out or anything like that. But, I got some pill millipedes recently that I'm really enjoying. I haven't had them in a really long time. They're not the big giant African ones, so don't get too excited, everybody. They're very small species, and I'm just really, really excited about having them again. And I really enjoyed setting up their little 8-ounce tank that I'm keeping them in. And at this very moment, they are the ones that I enjoyed receiving and setting up most recently. And so, I'm kind of a live in the moment kind of person, enjoy this moment as much as I can, but, sort of keep an eye out, pay attention to what I'm doing now so that tomorrow's even better than today was kind of person. I don't think backwards so much. I am really looking forward to reproducing those little pill millipedes that I got in recently, or if you will, pillipedes. What a fun word. Last question that will get me caught up here is from Smocklers from 1 minute ago. Are there any specific requirements to breeding any of the Chrysina species, specifically the woody eye? They are walnut leaf feeders. So when you have mature beetles, you want to have access to walnut leaves. And if you go back to the video I did, I think about a week ago, about Chrysina, about beetle larvae in general, I did a little section in there where I showed the setup for a tank for the pupation, where they metamorphose from larvae to adults using clay at the bottom of the container. And so I would recommend that you pop back to that video, and assuming my finger is pointing to the right place, you can click this link above here. I can never remember which side it is because I haven't done this enough. So thank you for your questions, Smocklers, and please review the videos that I recommended. So, hey, if you like me, give me one of those thumbs up, and please subscribe and hit the little bell so you know when I post next. Please share me with your friends on social media. Thank you for watching.